After my friend's husband died in an accident, she wanted to have a baby to keep her company. And she even wanted to use my husband's sperm. Your husband is so strong, and he was also good friends with my husband. The baby born with his sperm would surely look like my husband. Anyway, you don't want to have children. It's your good fortune that I'm willing to use your husband's sperm to have a baby. It'll be nice for you to have a godson without any pain. I disagreed and rejected her on the spot. However, when I came back from a business trip, Grace was already pregnant and even moved into my house blatantly. In the afternoon, when Grace and I were taking a walk in the community park, Matthew was doing pull-ups alone in the exercise area not far away. When Grace looked over, Matthew just rolled up his sleeves and revealed his beautiful biceps. A few glimmers flashed in her eyes, and she reached out and took my arm. Aurora, Matthew looks quite strong. Does he exercise often? Since my husband left, I've been alone all the time. What do you think if I use his sperm to have a baby to accompany me? Aurora, your husband is in good health and was also the best friend of my husband. The baby born with your husband's sperm would surely look like coal. Besides, you can't get pregnant. It's your good fortune that I use your husband's sperm. It'll let you have a godson without any pain. The female voice with a smile rang in my ears. I was stunned for a moment and my mind went blank for an instant. Did she want to borrow my husband's sperm? And she even hoped that the baby would look like coal in their family? Wasn't this just a dream? Even if she hadn't read many books, she should at least have watched the news, right? Didn't she even have this basic common sense? It was true that I hadn't been pregnant, but I didn't need a godson either. I smiled stiffly, pulled out my arm without showing any trace, and then gently refused her. The baby born with Matthew's sperm wouldn't look like coal. They don't have any blood relationship. And there's no need to use my husband's. If you want to have a baby, you can go to the hospital to find a better match. Besides, you're still young. You don't necessarily have to raise a child alone as a single parent. When she saw that I refused, her face fell immediately. You don't even want the good fortune given to you. So many people want to find someone to help them have a baby but can't. You can be a mother without any pain, but you're still unwilling? I patiently explained to her, I like my current lifestyle. There's no need to have a baby. Grace looked indignant, covering her stomach with both hands as if she were holding some precious treasure. I think you can't have children, right? I'm giving you a chance to have a son, but you don't want it. You're really ungrateful. Hearing her say that, I got a bit angry at once. I'm not unable to have children. I just don't want to have one now. Is there anything wrong with that? If you're sick, go and get treatment. You can be a mother without any pain. Do you want this good fortune or not? Perhaps the voices of our argument were a bit loud. Matthew noticed that the atmosphere on our side was not right and then walked over. Considering that she had just lost her husband, I didn't want her to get too emotional either, so I shut my mouth. After going home, I told my husband Matthew about this matter, but to my surprise, he agreed. Grace is pitiful all by herself. Now that she has finally recovered a bit and wants a baby to accompany her, isn't it a normal thing? You should be more understanding towards her. Old Zhao was my best friend when he was alive. It's only right to help his wife. Even after my mother-in-law knew about this matter, she also gave her full support. Cole and Grace are both good kids. Cole and Matthew have been friends for decades. I think it's okay. After all, we can't let Grace be alone all the time. There's still a long way to go in the future. In the whole family, I was the only one who objected. I firmly stated my attitude in front of the whole family. I firmly disagree with this matter. There are plenty of ways for Grace to have a baby. There's no need to use Matthew's. Matthew and my mother-in-law didn't say anything. They just smiled and glossed over the topic. After that, just a few days later, I was assigned to work abroad. When I came back 2 months later, everything at home had changed completely. Originally, this business trip should have lasted for several more days. However, the partner suddenly had a new arrangement, so our team returned to China directly. All the messages I sent to Matthew before boarding the plane got no reply. After landing, with a bit of doubt in my heart, I took a taxi directly from the airport and went home. When I opened the door, I stood at the entrance for a long time to calm down my mood before I walked in. The floor was filled with express deliveries and cardboard boxes, blocking the corridor of the entrance completely. I had a hard time even stretching my legs. Most of the opened express deliveries on the ground were pregnancy-related items, and there were also several pieces of blue baby clothes at the corner not far away. I frowned, not quite understanding what was going on. So I picked up my phone and called Matthew again, but still no one answered. Just when I was full of anger and had nowhere to vent it, the door opposite opened, and I met Zoe's eyes. When she saw it was me, she greeted me warmly. But when she saw the express deliveries all over the floor, her expression changed. "Aurora, you and Matthew haven't divorced yet, right?" "No, we haven't." I didn't expect Zoe would ask like this. But after hearing my answer, there was a bit of pity on her face. "Let me tell you, it seems that your husband has brought a woman home to live. I've also heard words like pregnancy several times. You should be careful. Also, these express deliveries in your house." Zoe wrinkled her face and pointed at those express boxes in disgust. "They were all piled up at the door before, blocking the whole corridor. A few days ago, I complained to the property management, and they reluctantly moved them inside." Seeing my puzzled look, Zoe lowered her voice and muttered, "He's so bold to bring a pregnant woman outside home before getting divorced." Then she took the elevator and went downstairs, leaving me alone, full of anger and suspicion. I immediately called the errand runner downstairs and asked him to take all these things out and throw them away. When Elijah, the errand runner, was sitting on the floor of my house packing up the things, he couldn't help asking me several times, "Sister, are you sure you don't want any of these?" "Sister, these things are quite expensive." I reached out to take the little gadget he handed me, casually opened the Taobao app and checked it. It was probably a few thousand yuan. Although it wasn't something terribly expensive for me, there were just too many items of this price all over the floor. After thinking for a while, I still said, "Elijah, help me pack them all up and put them away at home for now." "Sure." After Elijah finished packing, 5 huge snakeskin bags were piled up in the living room. As the sky gradually darkened, I sat on the sofa thinking about why there was a pregnant woman living in my house and why there were so many pregnancy-related items. Could it be that Matthew had someone outside and even brought her home? But if it was so blatant and without any scruples, it probably wasn't an affair that needed to be kept secret. Until there was the sound of unlocking the door and the voices of a man and a woman talking outside. "Matthew, what did you buy this time? Is it for me?" "Yes, it's a sleep pillow for you. Pregnant women need to sleep well, right?" "Thank you, Matthew. You're so nice." Hearing these familiar voices, who else could it be but my husband Matthew and Grace? The two of them walked into the living room while chatting and laughing. When I looked over, Matthew was helping Grace and trying to lead her to sit on the sofa. It was only when he turned around that he noticed my presence. I looked at them coldly, and the corners of my mouth couldn't help curling up with a sarcastic smile. I didn't say a word and just looked at them, raising my eyebrows. Matthew was surprised to see me and immediately let go of Grace's arm without showing any trace. "Honey, why are you back? Why didn't you ask me to pick you up?" Matthew stood beside me and scratched his head a bit awkwardly. I still didn't respond and just stared at Grace, my gaze gradually moving down from her eyes to her stomach where there was still no visible sign of pregnancy. Seeing me like this, Grace simply didn't avoid it and reached out to touch her own stomach, smiling at me and saying, "Aurora, my IVF was successful." So everything made sense now. The pregnancy products all over the floor and Matthew's disappearance all had an explanation. Matthew stood beside me, trying to soothe my emotions. "Honey, I can explain this. Don't be angry first. You know that Grace has always wanted a child, and my mom has always supported this. Later, we went to the hospital for an examination and my sperm quality was quite good, so..." Matthew touched his nose and moved a little closer to me, which was a sign of his guilt. So you two did IVF behind my back and now it's already in the pregnancy stage? I said with a blank expression, as if I had just heard something completely unimportant. Matthew was about to speak when Grace suddenly interrupted him. That's right. I'm already pregnant, Aurora. It's useless for you to disagree now. The baby is already in my belly. Do you want me to have an abortion? Grace stood in front of me, looking down at me. Her arrogant attitude somehow gave her a bit of an imposing manner. I couldn't help sneering. Who wants you to have an abortion? It's not my child. Why should I care about it? However, you used my husband's sperm. Only someone with a screw loose would do such a thing. After all, the baby will be an illegitimate child when born. Don't you think so? Grace's face flushed with anger when she heard me say illegitimate child. What do you mean? Watch your mouth. We did it through proper IVF, and both parents agreed. So what? Only the parents' agreement is needed and the wife's isn't? To put it nicely, you did IVF. To put it bluntly, you two had an affair during the marriage. Since that's the case, I might as well give Matthew to you so that the baby in your belly can have a legitimate status. What do you think? Hearing what I said, Grace actually thought about it seriously for a few seconds. Seeing her like this, I felt even more sarcastic in my heart. We had been friends for so many years, and she actually had such thoughts. I then turned to look at Matthew beside me. Probably knowing that I was very angry, he immediately squatted beside me, trying to coax me. But what he said was, Aurora, I know this wasn't agreed by you in advance, but now that Grace's IVF has been successful, this baby definitely has to stay. You've never had the idea of having a baby, right? Grace is taking the pain for you in this matter. You should be grateful to her. Matthew's tone was gentle, but what he said completely shattered my values. I was boiling with anger and was about to curse him when there was a loud knocking on the door and a shrill female voice. My dear grandson, Grandma's here to see you. The voice outside the door was so ear-piercing that I felt it was noisy even with the door closed. As soon as I frowned, Matthew beside me had already rushed over to open the door. As soon as Matthew's mother entered the door, she went straight to Grace, who was standing in front of me. My dear Grace, why are you still standing? Come on, sit down quickly. Aurora, what's the matter with you? Don't you know that Grace is pregnant? It's not right for you to sit while she stands. Matthew, go make some tea. There's pregnant woman's tea in my bag. Take it, dissolve it with warm water and then add some boiling water. Aurora, don't sit here anymore. Go get a blanket for Grace. Pregnant women can't catch a cold. She started giving orders as soon as she entered the living room, completely ignoring the tense atmosphere among us. Grace's face also gradually lit up with a smile. Auntie, don't make a fuss. It's still early in the pregnancy. It's precisely because it's early that we need to start paying attention. Don't worry. I'll stay here to take care of you and make sure you won't be wronged. Just stay here at ease. I sat in a corner of the sofa and immediately crossed my arms, looking at them with an unfriendly expression when I heard this. How could you just feel at ease living here? This is like barging right into my house and settling down. No wonder there are so many express deliveries at home. So it turns out that you're planning to bring your ancestors home. I sneered in front of them. Before I could even say a word, my mother-in-law stood up, pointed at me and scolded, Aurora, what do you think you're doing? Grace is carrying the heir of the Smith family in her belly now. Show her some respect, or I'll drive you out of this family. You're a barren hen. There hasn't been any sign of pregnancy in you for years. How dare you laugh here? Hurry up and get a blanket for Grace. The Smith family doesn't rely on you anymore. There's someone who can give birth to a son for the Smith family. I never expected that my mother-in-law would scold me directly. Filled with anger already, I couldn't care less about her status as an elder at this moment and started arguing with her on principle. It's not that I can't have children. I just don't want to have them yet. Isn't your son also? Before I could finish my words, Matthew, who was pouring tea, walked over and interrupted me. He just brushed past me, served tea to the two of them, clearly taking their side. Mom, don't be angry. Aurora didn't mean to target Grace. She just hasn't gotten used to Grace's identity yet. I'll have a good talk with her first. Grace's identity? What kind of identity does Grace have that I need to get used to? Besides, this is my house. Do I still have to accommodate her according to their demands? I was just about to lose my temper when the burly Matthew dragged me aside. I couldn't resist him at all. It wasn't until he dragged me into the bedroom and locked the door behind him. Aurora, in the 2 years since we got married, you've always been reluctant to have children, and I respected your decision. But my mom can't wait. There has to be an irrefutable reason for her to calm down. Hearing his words, I immediately understood what he meant. So you just told your mom that I can't have children? Well, now that she can finally have a grandchild, she definitely won't agree to abort the baby. I sneered. It's not just your mom, right? You don't want to abort this baby either. A glint of light flashed in Matthew's eyes, and he actually admitted it directly. After all, it's my child. Of course I can't bear to part with it. I rolled my eyes at him. Okay, so the situation now is that you got a baby with someone else while I was away from home. So now that we're getting divorced, you're the one at fault and should leave the house with nothing. Is that okay? As soon as I finished speaking, Matthew's mother suddenly pushed the door open and barged in. Aurora, have you no shame? How dare you say that my son should leave the house with nothing? It's clearly you, a woman who can't have children. Now Grace is willing to give birth to a child for the Smith family, and you're still not happy about it. Someone like you, a slut. No one will want you even after divorce. You still want to take a share of my son's property. You're just dreaming. She stood in front of me, her shrill voice seeming to pierce my eardrums. Spittle sprayed on my face layer by layer, making me feel sick. When I got married to Matthew, she wasn't such a shrewish woman in my eyes. At that time, she was very nice to me, often bringing me some skin care products, and her words were full of concern for me. Later, I found out that those were all folk remedies she somehow found to help women get pregnant. I had always told her that we didn't have a plan to have children yet and would wait until our work was a bit easier in a few years. Now I realize that it was because Matthew told her that I was in poor health and couldn't have children, and now they even found another woman to have a baby. It seems that they might have started planning this several months ago. Whether I agreed or not didn't matter. And it just happened to be the time when I was on a business trip abroad. By the time I came back, everything was already settled. Looking at the nagging mother-in-law and Matthew, who had a smug look on his face, in front of me, I felt disgusted. If you have something wrong with your ears and can't hear clearly, or if you have problems with your brain and can't understand what others are saying, go and get treatment. Don't become a cerebral palsy patient in the future and still ask your precious son to take you to the hospital. There's nothing wrong with my body. I had an agreement with your son that we wouldn't have children for the time being. But now you directly had a test tube baby with another woman. Who knows if it's really a test tube baby? Matthew's brother would probably be turning over in his grave. Since the baby is already here, it's okay to say it's cheating during marriage, right? Or if you want it to be more serious, is it illegal? Who would have thought that after I said this, the mother-in-law standing in front of me immediately flew into a rage. She directly reached out, grabbed my hair and tried to drag me to the ground. You cheap woman, how dare you threaten us? I must teach you a lesson today, or you won't know your place in this family. As she said that, her hand was already raised, ready to slap me. I quickly grasped her hand that was in the air, but Matthew, who was standing aside, quickly walked up to me and slapped me directly. My face instantly started burning with pain, and there was even a bit of tinnitus constantly ringing in my ears. Aurora, I've really had enough of you. Not only have you been ordering me around all day, but now you're even scolding my mom directly. The reason you don't want children is actually that you can't have them, right? Grace and I have been friends for decades. She wants to have a baby, and you're still not happy about it? I've endured you enough in the past few years since we got married. Now that you look down on my mom, let's get divorced right away. The money we each earned has always been spent by ourselves. You can take your money, and of course, my money belongs to me. The Matthew in front of me was arrogant, and he even twisted the wrist of the hand that had slapped me. He was a fitness enthusiast, and this slap was really hard. It wasn't until the dizziness in my head subsided a bit that I felt the taste of blood in my mouth. It turned out that he had always been dissatisfied with me all along, but I was still deceiving myself into thinking that I had found the person who treated me best. During the time when we were dating and after we got married, he had always been obedient to me. As long as my requests were not excessive, he would satisfy me, and from time to time, he would even prepare some little surprises for me. But now, this man in front of me was looking at me with disgust, allowing his mother to lay hands on me and even hitting me directly himself. So all the kindness before was just an act. I trembled and said, "So why did you marry me?" He smiled and raised his hand to pinch my chin, saying, "I valued that you were good-looking, had a nice figure, and were stupid with a lot of money. Otherwise, why do you think we could run into each other by chance as soon as you went to the gym?" Matthew and I did meet at the gym. At that time, he was just a personal trainer at the gym. But I didn't take his classes. My personal trainer was a girl. It was just that I went to the gym so often that it was inevitable to bump into him. Later, when I went to work out by myself, I often met him too. After chatting casually, I learned that he was a friend of the boss and was invited to be a personal trainer here. Now that I think about it, since he was the boss's friend, he might have investigated my financial situation long ago, so that he could find me accurately. After getting along for a few months, we smoothly became boyfriend and girlfriend. At that time, after my mother knew that he was a personal trainer at the gym, she reminded me, "Aurora, isn't it said that gyms are usually quite chaotic? You should still examine this boy more carefully." My mother mentioned this matter to me several times, so I also had some doubts. So I never told Matthew my real job and family background. He only knew that my family had some money and that I was a little manager in the company. After he proposed to me, I also hesitated about whether to tell him or not. But my mother still asked me to hide it. At that time, she didn't approve of my marriage either. It was just that I was indulging in the whirlpool of love and was eager to have a family with him. After getting married, he had always been nice to me, and his mother was also very kind to me. So I bought that gym and gave it to him. At that time, I just said that it was my dowry. After getting married, he managed the gym while I worked in my own company. Neither of us was short of money. So our accounts had never been shared. After all, I didn't need the little money he earned from the gym. But now he actually hid it from me and directly had in vitro fertilization with someone else, and even bluntly said that when we divorced, he would take away the money he earned himself. But did he forget that I was the one who gave him that gym? Although he had been managing it in these years and the money had all gone into his own account, the registered owner of this store was me. That is to say, he only had the right to operate it, not the ownership. However, the Matthew in front of me seemed to have no idea about this at all. The way he looked at me was as if he was looking at something dirty. Grace didn't know when she walked to the door of the bedroom. After hearing Matthew's words, she sneered, and her words were full of sarcasm. "I wondered how Matthew could take a fancy to a woman like you. Now he's the owner of the gym and is even preparing to open branches. You just have a little money. Aren't you still unable to help Matthew in any way? Now the money Matthew earns is all the result of his own efforts. What are you? You're just a stepping stone for Brother Jia, and a stepping stone that can't even get pregnant and leave descendants for him." Hearing these words, Matthew beside her immediately straightened his neck. I lowered my head and smiled. My cheek was being pulled, and there was a burst of pain. He just took the money for running the store for a few years and received some small favors, and he really thought he was a big boss? I licked the blood at the corner of my mouth and quietly took a few steps back. When Matthew's mother saw Grace coming, she immediately went to the door. "Grace, you should be careful not to walk around casually, lest..." Before she could finish her words, there was a heavy sound of a body hitting the ground. When they looked over again, they found that I had already given Matthew a shoulder throw. After all, before I met him, I didn't just go to the gym. I also practiced boxing. Matthew was pinned to the ground by me, and I turned over and sat on him. Before he could react, I slapped him left and right, and several slaps landed on his face. I've never lost a fight in my life. How dare you lay hands on me? You're really overestimating yourself. When screams rang out at the door, Matthew's face was already swollen high and was as red as a monkey's butt. After this farce ended, my hair was messy, and there was still some suspicious blood at the corner of my mouth. Matthew's face was completely unrecognizable. He sat in the dining room and looked at me with hatred, but didn't dare to lay hands on me again. After all, my 10 years of Sonda practice wasn't for nothing. The trophy in the corner of the study at home was the championship trophy of Sonda in central China. Matthew had strength, but he was no match for me at all. Even Grace and his mother became much more docile. They only dared to gather around Matthew to ask after him, with a few accusations against me mixed in between. This woman is so cruel. She even dares to hit her own husband. He's about to become not my husband soon. Anyway, he's just trash. It's quite good for you to be a recycling station for him. No wonder Aurora has always been so domineering. Who would dare to marry her after the divorce? You don't need to worry. I would never do something like getting another woman pregnant during the marriage. Matthew's mother was filled with indignation, but after seeing my fighting ability, she didn't dare to get close to me at all. She only dared to hide aside and mutter, secretly scolding me. I took some time to send a message to the company's legal department, asking them to draft the divorce agreement immediately. I sat on the sofa and applied an ice pack to my face to reduce the swelling, but after enduring it for a few minutes, Matthew's mother strode to me and snatched the ice pack out of my hand. There's only one ice pack. What will my son use if you use it? How could our Smith family marry a daughter-in-law like you? You're so fierce and vicious. I smiled and stretched out my foot to block the way she was about to leave. She didn't react in time and was tripped by me and fell to the ground. Looking at her funny appearance, I still couldn't help laughing out loud. She immediately lay on the ground and started rolling around, shouting, "My daughter-in-law is actually bullying her mother-in-law. Is there any justice left? How could anyone do such a thing? I'm over 60 years old and she even laid hands on me. It's really bullying." She flailed about on the ground, kicking her feet around randomly. The soles of her leather shoes were already hard, and under her indiscriminate attacks, the leg of my favorite coffee table was kicked off by her. A loud noise of glass shattering rang out, which startled me as well. But she was still lying on the ground feigning illness. Before long, there was a knock on the door. "Matthew, Aurora, are you there? Is everything okay at home?" The noise at the entrance of the living room must have been from the neighbors downstairs. I walked over and opened the door a crack, intending to just mumble a few words to fob them off and make them leave quickly. Unexpectedly, Ryan, the neighbor downstairs, directly reached his hand through the crack, pushed the door open with force, and I staggered from his push and almost fell. He was still holding his mobile phone in his hand. As soon as he saw the mess on the floor of my house, he immediately slipped inside. Seeing the broken glass all over the floor in the middle of the living room, he said with a smile, "Everyone was really prescient." Sure enough, the coffee table collapsed. Thanks to the big brothers who lost the bet for sending roses. In that case, we'll send out a small red envelope in the live stream. He stared at his phone cheerfully while broadcasting the whole situation in my house. Matthew's mother was still lying on the ground flailing about. Before long, one of her leather shoes on her feet was flung off by her, and she kept saying, "Why did I end up with a daughter-in-law who hits the elderly? There's simply no justice. I'm an old woman in my 60s or 70s and still have to be bullied." Looking at this scene in front of me, I immediately frowned. Although this incident was caused by them and I didn't lay a hand on the old woman, I didn't want to make a big fuss out of it, let alone become famous because of it. So after thinking for a long time, I strode over and blocked the camera lens of Ryan's mobile phone with my hand, saying, "Ryan, stop filming. This is my family's private matter. Get out now." I covered the lens with one hand and grabbed his arm with the other to pull him outside. But he seemed to regard me as some kind of plague god. Immediately, he widened his eyes and pointed at my hand, saying, "Don't touch me. I heard from Auntie that you hit her. Do you want to hit me now too? I'm not that weak. Besides, I'm broadcasting live now and thousands of people are watching." I saw the barrage of comments and messages neatly displayed on the screen of the mobile phone whose lens I was blocking. They were all asking him to stop this kind of family behavior. Matthew and Grace, who were sitting aside, also stood up and walked over. However, they didn't object at all. Instead, they even fanned the flames, saying, "Ryan, you must record properly how this woman is bullying our family." Matthew covered his face, looking like he had been bullied. Ryan got their approval and immediately became excited. Then he pushed away my hand that was blocking his lens. Everyone heard it too. I continued the live broadcast only after getting the master of the house's consent. The scene was really horrible. The master of the house was also injured, and his face was already swollen beyond recognition. After filming Matthew, he turned the camera and started filming Matthew's mother lying beside a pile of broken glass again. "Auntie, what's going on? Did Aurora hit you? Get up quickly. Don't lie beside the broken glass. Get up." As he said that, Ryan reached out to help her, but she didn't want to get up and just kept moaning on the ground. "Oh, I'm an old woman and I'm afraid I can't get up. My legs and my waist hurt so much." She grimaced as she spoke, accompanied by the pile of broken glass beside her, as if she had really been seriously injured. Matthew, who was standing aside, also opened his mouth. "Aurora, my mother is your mother-in-law after all. It's okay if you laid hands on me, but how could you lay hands on an old person? You're showing no respect for your elders." The number of people in the live stream was still rising, and waves of abuse against me had already started popping up in the barrage. How could this woman be so cruel? She even broke the coffee table. This is blatant domestic violence. It's recommended to call the police and let them come directly. It's not easy to punish a woman like this. Yes, don't let her off. Ryan saw this and started filming various details in the living room. My mother-in-law was also lying on the ground constantly accusing me of my actions, looking like she wouldn't stop until she got justice. I was just about to say something when Ryan immediately turned around and pointed his phone at me. I didn't want to show my face on the internet, so I frowned, covered my face, and sharply interrupted his filming. "Ryan, without my permission, you have no right to film me. Besides, this is my family's business. What are you meddling in here?" At this time, quite a few people had gathered at the door of my house. They were all neighbors from next door or nearby, and they were all standing at the door whispering and discussing. Matthew, who was standing aside, had a look of schadenfreude on his face, looking as if he was waiting to see what I would do. He probably thought that I couldn't solve the problem of being accused of bullying the elderly. But he forgot that this incident was caused by his hiding from me that he had done in vitro fertilization with another woman. He knew that I was a person who cared about face, and probably thought that I wouldn't tell everyone the whole story in front of them. But at a time like this, no matter how much I cared about face, I had to disclose the ins and outs of the matter. I sneered and simply decided to go all out. Anyway, this mess had nothing to do with me. I was about to divorce this man soon, and I would make sure he left the house with nothing. Fine. You can watch if you want. If it weren't for the fact that I only found out my husband was preparing to have a baby with another woman outside and that he even slapped me when I argued with him, I wouldn't be so angry. That's why I slapped him a few times. As for my mother-in-law, she came to snatch things from me, didn't watch her step and tripped over. Then she lay on the ground, throwing tantrums and even kicked and broke the coffee table that I bought for 100,000 yuan. A woman should marry someone like Second Master, a real man. Besides, all my spending is for investment. The money earned will be marital property, and there's no distinction between you and me. Grace, who was standing by the dining table, suddenly turned as pale as a ghost, and Matthew also looked ghastly. They probably didn't expect that I would really tell this story after all. We hadn't divorced yet, and they thought that I would at least care about my reputation. But not only did I take out my phone to dial, but I also said, "You guys should judge for me." This woman was already pregnant when they told me that they had done in vitro fertilization. They even framed me, saying that I couldn't have children. My physical examination report from 2 months ago is still at home. These people are really good at making unfounded accusations. My mother-in-law even called me a hen that can't lay eggs. I couldn't argue with them alone, and I was slapped by my husband. Now I'm still being scolded. What kind of thing is this? As I spoke, I seemed to be more and more aggrieved, and finally, the call was connected. Immediately, whether it was the people present or in the live stream, the public opinion took a sharp turn. Ah? What a drama of the year. How could it be like this? Was it real in vitro fertilization or fake? Could it be that they had already got into bed long ago? Isn't it too much to call the female lead a hen that can't lay eggs? It's obvious that the man didn't do anything and didn't explain. No wonder there were 2 women in the room. So the woman standing beside the man is the one who had in vitro fertilization. How despicable. As soon as I finished speaking, the barrage exploded. Even Ryan couldn't believe this turn of events and stared at Matthew in astonishment. Matthew's face was extremely ugly, and he quickly walked over and asked him to turn off the live stream and leave immediately. Perhaps because Matthew looked big and strong, or maybe because he had a good relationship with him on weekdays. Although he was reluctant to let go of this wave of traffic, he still took steps and prepared to go outside. However, I stood at the entrance and blocked his way. "Matthew, why are you driving him away? Wouldn't it be better to make things clear in front of everyone?" Just as I finished speaking, several people in suits carrying briefcases walked in through the door. Looking at the familiar face of the leader, I smiled slightly. They were quite efficient and just in time. "General Manager Aurora, we've already done what you asked us to do." "Well, you were very quick. Come in and sit down." I greeted them, walked around the several people who were looking at each other in the room, and sat at the dining table. Before the group of people could ask me anything, I said, "Matthew, didn't you say you wanted a divorce? These are my lawyers, and this is the divorce agreement they drafted according to our situation. Read it carefully. If there's no problem, sign it in front of everyone. If you have any questions, raise them on the spot. There's a professional legal team here to answer them for you." After saying that, I smiled and looked at the group of people again. "Take out your work certificates and relevant certificates." As soon as I finished speaking, several people took out several work certificates of my company and legal professional qualification certificates from their briefcases in unison. Naturally, the legal team in my company was the elite among the elites. Sure enough, the netizens in the live stream also exclaimed how awesome it was when they saw these certificates. "Oh my God, Aurora is so cool. Legal Professional Qualification Certificate of Type A? Oh my God, it's my dream for a lifetime. Isn't this the work permit of the Johnson Family Group? Could Aurora be from the Johnson Family Group? Isn't Aurora the executive president of the Johnson Family Group? Is that the name? But I can't find pictures online. Could it be a coincidence?" Ryan saw the crazy discussion on the barrage and immediately changed his attitude towards me. "Aurora, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have barged in so rashly today. I'll leave now, and I'll also help you drive away the neighbors at the door." Ryan clasped his fists at me, looking scared. I sneered and reached out to stop him. "Since we've started talking openly and frankly, then you should continue the live stream to the end. It will also be evidence when dealing with the divorce later." Ryan gave 2 awkward smiles and had no choice but to nod repeatedly, not daring to take a step. Matthew and Grace, who were standing aside, looked unfriendly. They probably didn't expect that I had already arranged everything so thoroughly. The mother-in-law lying on the ground saw that the situation was not right and also reached out to ask Matthew to pull her up. Nathaniel from the legal team immediately sent them the divorce agreement. Matthew flipped through a few pages, and his face became darker and darker. In the end, he was so angry that he tore up those sheets of paper. "Aurora, what do you mean? What do you mean the gym doesn't belong to me? And I have to return the business income of these years to you? Don't you bully people too much. Legal counsel Nathaniel had probably anticipated Matthew's reaction long ago. He directly reached into his briefcase and took out a stack of identical divorce agreements. Referring to the clauses listed on them, he took out the business license of the gym. Mr. Matthew, here is the business license of the gym, as well as the documents from when General Manager Aurora acquired it. They all bear the official seal. If you have any objections, you can go to the Industrial and Commercial Bureau to check. Besides, General Manager Aurora didn't sign a labor contract with you. As her husband, you were originally entitled to only half of the gym's income. However, since you had an extramarital affair during the marriage and it's a fact that Miss Grace is pregnant, as the party at fault, General Manager Aurora's request is that you leave the marriage with nothing. We've already gone to the gym and checked the revenue records of the past few years before coming here. You also need to return about 300,000 yuan to General Manager Aurora. Here are all the explanatory documents. You can take a look. When Matthew's mother heard Nathaniel say this, she immediately lay on the ground again and started shouting and screaming, claiming that I was bullying her son and their Smith family, and even cursing that I would come to no good end. Ryan stood motionless in the corner, holding his mobile phone, not daring to breathe, and even some beads of sweat appeared on his forehead. But he could clearly see the barrage. The netizens were not fools. After this farce, they quickly understood the whole story. Many people were sending me little red hearts in the barrage. General Manager Aurora has really thought of everything. I love it so much. Is the company hiring? Recruit me in the autumn recruitment. As expected of the executive president of the Johnson Family Group, the team is so professional, and they've also made good use of the live broadcast. Am I the only one who noticed the expressions of that man and the test tube woman? It's really hilarious. This old lady is also muddle-headed. She's still pretending to be crazy and acting stupid. She's clearly a troublemaker. I watched my mother-in-law on the ground gradually lose her strength, and then I crouched beside her and said, "You just kicked and broke my coffee table." I bought this coffee table from an overseas designer exhibition. It cost more than 100,000 yuan. I'll round it down for you. Just give me 100,000 yuan. She was immediately stunned on the spot, and the broken glass shards under her feet seemed to become sharper. Matthew probably thought she was embarrassing and pulled her up and threw her onto the sofa. Grace standing beside him also tried hard to make herself less noticeable, as if she wished that everyone couldn't see her. Matthew still didn't give up and called the staff at the gym. They all said that someone had indeed come to check the revenue records with relevant documents half an hour ago. And there was no problem with the business license and such. Matthew put down his phone with trembling hands, and his gaze at me gradually changed from resentment at the beginning to pitifulness. Finally, he actually walked up to me, his eyes full of grievance and pleading, "Honey, I'm sorry. We didn't make it clear to you about the test tube thing at the beginning. Let's not get divorced, okay? I'll ask her to have an abortion. Honey, don't be angry." Those words were all taught to me by my mom and Grace. We've been married for such a long time. Don't you know whether I love you or not? I only agreed to the test tube thing with Grace because she begged me. I looked at him with an expression as if I were looking at an idiot. Do you think I'm stupid? Please read the content of the divorce agreement clearly now. If there's no problem, sign it. After the divorce cooling off period, we'll go to get the divorce certificate. I rolled my eyes at him. Looking at his face that was still swollen like a bun, I even wanted to slap him a few more times. My mother-in-law lying on the ground also understood the situation now and really started crying while leaning on the sofa, but no one paid any attention to her. Even Grace standing aside didn't bother to care about her. Under the pressure of the live broadcast and the on-site legal counsel, Matthew could no longer find any flaws in the divorce agreement and had to sign it with trembling hands. The gym that was supposed to be in his name was about to be taken back, and he also had to compensate me hundreds of thousands of yuan. After this incident, he could be said to be bankrupt and penniless. After the live broadcast ended, the Johnson family group unexpectedly became a bit popular. Although it was because of my personal affairs, it brought quite a lot of benefits to the group. And it was the autumn recruitment season, and the group recruited quite a number of new employees. My reputation as a cool woman spread throughout the company. I myself didn't know whether to laugh or cry about this. After all, I originally thought it was an embarrassing thing that I couldn't talk about, but who knew it brought me unexpected benefits. During the divorce cooling-off period, Matthew tried every means to communicate with me, wanting to salvage everything. But every time he sent me a message, I would only reply with one sentence: pay back the money. And after learning that Matthew went bankrupt, Grace immediately had an abortion, took the little inheritance left by her ex-husband, and went abroad. In the future, the Smith family would have neither a grandson nor money.